Here are 5 mistakes that I see nearly every single buyer make at auction that wants to buy the house. They're very common, and I'd say of all the auctions I attend kind of just to watch, probably happens, I'd say, at least 90% of the time. And then I watch the person that actually knows how and when to bid at auction get the property, and the people that missed out don't know what happened. Well, I'm going to pull back the curtain. Let me start off this way. Auctions are not what they seem. They're not what they seem for the buyer, and they're not what they seem for the seller. So I'll just kind of leave that laying for now. I'm not going to get into that too much, but auctions by definition are a little bit deceptive. In fact, I'll tell you a little bit. From a seller's perspective, they're designed so the agent doesn't have to give the seller the actual price. The seller can say, well, I want $1 million. The agent can say, well, let's try an auction to get it, even if it's only worth $800,000. From a buyer's perspective, it's very hard to nail down the agent on an actual price, because in Queensland, the agent is not allowed to give you a price guide. It's the opposite of Victoria. In Victoria, they have to, and it has to be somewhat accurate. In Queensland, we not only don't have to, we're not allowed to do it. So it's very much buyer beware in Queensland, which means you as a buyer, you've got to know your stuff, and you've got to know what you're willing to pay. And if the market shows it's this, in this market, you may have to pay this to secure the property. So go into it with your eyes wide open. So based on that, number 1 is don't waste your time as a buyer asking the agent, can you give me a price guide? Because the agent isn't allowed to, by law, not allowed to. So what the agent will say, they'll be as vague as possible. They'll say, well, properties in the area have sold from this to this. This property is crap. This property is way better than the one they're auctioning, but that's the price range in the neighborhood. That's what they'll do. Complete waste of time. As a buyer, you need to do your own due diligence. You need to know where you think that property will lie, and then make your bids if you want to buy it according to the market that we're in. So again, don't waste your time asking the agent. The agent works for the seller. Don't forget that through this process. Now, you register to bid. That doesn't mean you have to bid, and that doesn't mean that you can be coerced into bidding. What agents are very good at doing is nuzzling up to you at the start of the auction and saying, hey, why don't you get things started and throw out the first bid? And you go, oh, he's kind of making me feel important. I'll throw out the first bid. Don't do that. Don't get sucked into that. Registering to bid means you have an interest in the property, and if you want to bid, you can, but it doesn't mean you have to throw out that first bid. Do not make that mistake, because it does not get you anywhere. Number 3, if you are the only bidder at an auction, be aware that you may get sucked into bidding against the seller, because in Queensland, the seller can make as many bids as they want in the process. So in other words, you make a bid of X and no one else bids, the seller can then bid you, and then you bid back on the seller, and then the seller bids back on you. That makes no sense. What you're actually doing is bidding on your own bid. And the seller can do that as many times as they want. In Victoria, not so. They can do one vendor bid. In Queensland, they can do as many as they want. So if there is only one bidder and it's you, don't even bother bidding. If you throw out a bid and no one else bids, and then the seller raises your bid and the agent comes over to you, nuzzles up to you, makes you feel all warm, fuzzy and special and important, and tries to get you throwing a bid against yourself, say, no, I'm going to wait. And then wait. And number 4, leading on from number 3, don't bid, that was a big pause, don't bid until the property's actually on the market to sell. So the seller sets a reserve and then people bid. If the bids don't reach the reserve, the property's not actually on the market. It doesn't sell. And sometimes the auctioneer will go, once, twice, let me go talk to the seller. Once, twice, let me go talk to the seller. It's not actually on the market. It's only on the market to actually sell when the auctioneer comes back and says, typically, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the market to sell. That means the property has probably reached the reserve, or the seller has had to lower the reserve to meet the market, and now the property's on the market, and now any bid will win the process. So do not bid at all. Don't get coerced into bidding until the property is announced as being on the market. If you're not sure, you're allowed to put your hand up and say, hey, is the property on the market? Auctioneers don't like that because they don't want everyone else to know it's not ready to sell yet. So they'll say, oh, no, it's not on the market yet. Next bid. And then if it goes a few more bids, is it on the market yet? Has it reached reserve? Don't be afraid to do that because it's a big investment. And if you don't do that, you'll get pushed around by the auctioneer and by the agent. And number 5, which is the last one, which is you control the bid amount. So in other words, if the auction has been going and it's now on the market and you're bidding because it's on the market and the bids are going up by 5, 10 or 15,000, you can put in a bid for $1,000 if you want. The auctioneer may say, no sir, we're not accepting any bids below $5,000. If no one bids, put your hand up again and go $1,000. And they might say, no sir, we're not accepting any bids under $5,000. You can yell back at the auctioneer and say, but no one else is bidding. It's on the market. You said it's on the market. My bid is $1,000 higher. So you can absolutely do that. Again, don't let the auctioneer or the agent bully you in to doing the bids at the level they want. You're the buyer, they're not. They're the seller and they're the auctioneer. So again, these tips are designed to help you as a buyer. Now, if you're a seller watching this, I'm not trying to be on the buyer's side, but I do want to be transparent to help the buyer buy a property. I hate seeing, and I've seen this a lot, buyers, especially young couples, make bids, hasn't reached reserve. The agent said, oh, let's go talk to the seller. They talk to the seller. They then raise their bid privately with the seller, still not at reserve. They finally come up to this price, sometimes higher than reserve. They all come back out, and the seller says, ladies and gentlemen, we're on the market. Young buyers, Mary and Bob, can you confirm your bid of 1.2 million? They go, yes, confirm 1.2 million, thinking they're going to get it. Then a smart bidder that's been waiting for it to come on the market goes 1.3, and the young couple go, we thought we were getting it for 1.2. They just got manipulated by the system. So don't let that be you. So that's it for this week. If you want to buy a house, call me. If you want to sell a house, obviously call me. If you want your property managed by a fantastic team out of Coolum Beach, well, we do that too.